to Getting Sketchy Live, brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. And now, let's get sketchy.
Hello there, everyone. Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and welcome to Getting Sketchy Live, where either myself or my good friend and fellow artist and art teacher Ashley Hurst tries to create a drawing for you within 45 minutes. And tonight, I'm going to be doing the drawing, and I'm going to be continuing with my motif, which there's been lots of jokes about my motif because it kind of ties into
your theme.
My motif.
You might be drawing motif at some point. It could be tonight. Who knows what Matt's going to draw tonight?
Well, I know what I'm going to be drawing tonight. I'm going to be drawing a nose. I knows what I'm going to be drawing. Boy, the puns are just rolling tonight. Anyway, my motif is I'm drawing facial features. So 2 weeks ago, I drew an eye, and tonight I'm going to draw a nose. And we'll walk through that process in just a minute. And hopefully I can finish my drawing in time. But you just caught a glimpse of Ashley over there. Ashley, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I hope you guys are out there as well. It's Wednesday, so got plenty of energy to read your questions and make up answers. So make sure if you have questions, you put them in the chat in all capital letters just to ensure that I'm likely to see them. And if I apologize if I miss anybody's comments in the next hour.
Absolutely. If you are watching this live on YouTube, there is a chat box. You, of course, can ask questions or make comments. And if you do put them in all capital letters, that will help Ashley see them a little bit easier amongst all the other ones, because sometimes the chat box gets rolling really quick and it's hard to keep up with all the comments and questions. Again, it doesn't have to be about what we're doing tonight. It can be anything art related, as long as it's kind of within a realm of being able to be answered or addressed within the time frame that we have here.
There are some philosophical art related questions we may never have an answer for, but we'll attempt them.
Yeah, we were talking philosophy right before we went live, and looked down and saw it was 6:30.
That's right.
And I decided to go ahead and start
Time
the
to draw.
stream, of course. Anyway, if you're new to the channel, or if you haven't done so yet, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. We cover a broad variety of drawing and painting media and subject matter here on this channel. In fact, the last video I published was on critiquing a piece of Van Gogh's artwork. That was published yesterday. And then there's tutorials like what we're going to be doing tonight, the live broadcast like we're doing tonight, of course. There's just a lot of content. So subscribe if you haven't already. If you like this video, make sure that you give it a thumbs up as well. And if you have something to add to this, make sure that you leave a comment below. And if you want to take your drawing and painting skills to another level, then I would encourage you to check out our membership program over at thevirtualinstructor.com. It includes a variety of drawing and painting courses on a variety of drawing and painting media and subject matter. Weekly live lessons, which after this broadcast, we're going to head over to thevirtualinstructor.com. We'll be finishing up our current live lesson series where Ashley is leading us through the process of creating a painting in Photoshop. All of our live lessons are recorded and stored in our vault, so you can go back and access all of the live lessons we've ever done. There is a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers, and there are weekly critiques as part of the Members Minute. All of that is included with the membership program. There's a link in the description below if you want to check that out. Or if you want to just dabble a little bit and check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, there's a link in the description below. You can check that out as well. All right, I think I've said everything.
All right, well, Margaret and Maria loved the Van Gogh critique, so they just wanted to mention that. And Brent Does Art loves to draw lips, so he knows that's coming at some time in the series. I don't know what week it's coming, but it's definitely coming. If you want to get a head start, that's totally okay.
Yeah, it'll be in 2 weeks. So I'm going to do the nose tonight.
So you're going straight down the face.
Straight down the face, and then we might back up to the ears. We'll see. But we got eyes, nose, mouth, and the ears. And then the last week, of course, last week for my motif, we'll probably do a whole portrait.
Putting it all together.
Anyway, I think that's all I need to say. I think we're ready to get into this one. So let's go ahead and switch over here.
All right, let's see what you're working with.
All right, here's the nose we're going to be drawing right over here. And if you want a closer look at this photo reference, if you go to the YouTube channel that you probably are on right now, or maybe close by, go to the channel. You can click on the little icon in the corner and click on community, and you'll see the photo reference there, so you can use it to draw alongside, or just keep in mind that it's going to be up beside the drawing paper tonight, so you can follow along that way as well. I do have a little tiny area that I've already spaced off here. And this is pretty small. This is only 3 inches by 4 inches, which is proportional to the nose over there. So it's going to help me find where the nose needs to be positioned on the paper. But I've got this purposely small, so I have a good chance of finishing this drawing tonight within 45 minutes. And I'm going to be working on Strathmore 400 series gray drawing paper here, just like I did 2 weeks ago. I love this paper. It's got a very weak tooth, so it makes blending very easy. And of course, whenever you're working on a gray surface, that starts you with a nice middle neutral value so that you can make value comparisons throughout the process pretty easily and ensure that you have a full range of value with the ample amount of contrast that you need. I'll be using these Mars Lumograph black pencils, which I used for the first time 2 weeks ago when we did the eye, and I really like them. They are somewhere in between a graphite pencil and a carbon pencil. I do think they have a pretty high amount of carbon in them there. And look at that. I got a little bit of, that is oil pastel, believe it or not, from the back of my container here. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get that off or not.
It's right in the middle.
Let's see here. Okay. Well, it'll be a skin.
It's a freckle.
Imperfection in the final drawing, but that is
He started
oil
with
pastel.
the details. He's already drawn a freckle.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll hope that translates as a dark gray instead of a dark green, which is what it actually is. Anyway, I've got some of these pencils already out, and I've got them sharpened. I'm going to be using an HB, and I'll be using an 8B for the really dark areas, and maybe a 2B. We'll see. I'm going to see how far I can push the HB and get away with it. I'm also going to be using white charcoal pencils. Let's make sure that's in the camera there. So I've got a couple of these sharpened and ready to go as well. And I have a few blending stumps and blending tortillas and those things for blending. It's always a good idea when you're working with graphite or any medium that is powdery and blendable. With the exclusion of charcoal and pastel, it's always a good idea to use a blending stump instead of your finger, because your finger has oils in it, and those oils tend to mix, especially with graphite, and kind of make a mess on the paper.
Make a dark spot.
Yeah, so that's why I've got the blending tools there. And, oh, man, I can't believe that happened. Let's see.
You could take a razor blade and scratch off those top fibers of the paper. That's what I do sometimes. Oh, gosh, it looks so dangerous. No, I don't know.
I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
It's going to be a freckle. All right, so we're going to pop up the timer here, unless we have any questions.
Well, I just want to welcome everybody who's here from Canada, the UK, Michigan, Scotland, also in the UK, Australia, Oklahoma, and the Space Coast of Florida, and all over America and all over the world. So thank you guys for being here. If you didn't tell us where you're from, maybe next time. Brent Does Art also mentioned that he's ordered those pencils that you're using, and he would highly recommend them also.
Oh, excellent.
So good to know.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and start the timer, and then I'm going to talk about. Well, all right. I'm going to say some theory about drawing the nose first.
Okay.
And there's not a formula for drawing facial features, but there is kind of a process you can go through. We can call it a process of observation. And whenever I draw noses, I look for 4 lines. And if I can locate these 4 lines and draw these 4 lines, then everything else usually falls into place. And these 4 lines are the lines for the nostrils. So just real quick, I'm just going to quickly kind of give you an idea. So that would be 1 line. And this would be another line. Now, I'm not looking at the nose right now. I'm just kind of drawing these
just from imagination.
Just from imagination. And then the other 2 lines would be what I call the nose flaps. I know they're the edges of the nostrils, but
I like flaps.
I like nose flaps better. I also refer to eyelids as eye flaps too. Anyway, these are the only 4 lines that I look for, and once I've got those in place, the rest is just adding value and shading. Now, everybody's nose is going to be different. Some people are going to have really small nostrils that are very hard to see, and some people are going to have very large nostrils. That some noses are going to be wider, obviously. Some noses are going to be skinnier.
Some kind of point downward and some up, so you see more or less of the nostrils. Changes the shape.
Yeah. Just like every person, every nose is different. So you got to really observe what you're looking at. But if you start drawing the nose by looking for those 4 lines and just kind of figuring out where they are, then everything else kind of falls into place a little bit easier. Now, you don't have to draw these lines quite so dark, but and if you look at the nose flaps, the edges of the nostrils really aren't lines at all. They're really just contrast in value or changes in value, but we kind of see them as lines anyway. So, all right, so that's what I'm going to be looking for. Let's go ahead and dive in. So I'm going to start the timer now for real. There's the 45 minutes.
There we go.
And I'm going to start by making a comparison with my picture plane that I've prepared here and the photo reference over here.
And your picture plane is 3 inches by 4 inches again,
right,
is
3
that
inches by 4 inches, so pretty small.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out where the top of my nostrils. Now, I could use any type of measuring to start this. So I might find where the bottom of the nostrils are going to be, and I'm just kind of figuring this out and making it relative to my reference. And then I'm going to figure out where the top of the nostrils are. Now, I was originally going to figure out where the top of the nostrils are and then the bottom of the nostrils, but I'm reversing that. Mm-hmm. And these exist pretty far down on the picture plane. Now I'm going to figure out where the middle part of the nostril is. And I'm still thinking about those lines.
You're still comparing these marks to the edge of the picture plane for spacing?
Yes, I'm trying to make sure that I get the nose in a similar location on my paper as it is in the reference. All right, so this is the beginning of my first line here, and that's the inside part of the nostril. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that up, and I'm going to look at the angle that's happening here, and I'm going to try to mimic kind of the same angle that's happening there, and then we'll just allow that to kind of wrap around a little bit. This is going to be a gradation of value, so it's not really a line, but I'm still kind of thinking in terms of line a little bit. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side here. This comes up at an angle, and then it angles over. And let's see.
Tell us again the name of these pencils.
These are Mars Lumograph Black pencils.
Okay, Mars Lumograph Black.
And I'm not really sure what's in them, but I do think there's graphite and carbon.
We had talked about how the lighter pencils were a little bit shinier than the darker pencils. Is that right? And so our suspicion is that there's a little more graphite in the lighter valued pencils, and that's how they're controlling the weight of the pencil. More carbon in the pencil's ratio, the darker you get.
Okay, this is when in reference to these lines here. This is my one line, and this is my second line. Okay, so I'm still looking for them. Although my lines look a little different, and there's lots of them there. We'll just pretend there's a singular line there. Now I'm going to work on the nose flaps, and I'm gonna call them nose flaps because I think that's a good description of what they are. They're just flapping there in the wind.
They just flap around.
And I've gotten really close to the edge over here with this nose flap. It's a little bit different than what's in the reference, and that's okay. Maybe we'll bring it a little bit further inside. And bring it down just like that. And we'll clean up a little bit of the outside here.
You know, I wish you'd have taken some time to draw some of the noses we see sometimes. Early nose attempts for some of our younger art students.
Oh, yeah. I like drawing noses the wrong way.
Right. There are some great wrong way noses out there that we see over and over. And one thing they have in common a lot of times is complete shapes for the nostrils, like complete, circles or some sort of a closed shape that's just as hard on the bottom edge as the top edge. But there's some great ones out there.
Yeah, they also, a lot of the noses I see drawn by folks like that are also involve some type of letter, like L.
Yeah, right.
Or a U with an extra one at the end, a rounded W. Mm-hmm. Or an upside down 7, which is kind of an L.
Kind of an L. It's got a little bit better of an angle on it.
All right, so we've got our lines in place now. These are our 4 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I wanted to spend a lot of time making this super accurate, I could. I've actually made the nose a little bit wider in the picture plane, but that's fine. So what we're going to do is we'll actually just cut off a little bit off the top here. We don't really need to draw all the stuff up there anyway. But the next step is to really start thinking about the value. Value is the darkness or lightness of a color. And I'm going to start down here inside of the nostril. If you look close, you can see that there's kind of a secondary shape that happens here. So we've got our 4 lines, but then if we look closer, we can see maybe some additional ones where we have some contrast in value happening. So the inside of this nostril area is obviously going to be pretty dark because that's where the light can't get to, deep in the recesses of the nostril.
The cave of the nose.
Right.
Brent Dozart can confirm for us that he spoke with Stiedler and that these pencils are, in fact, graphite and carbon mix.
Well, there you go.
There you go. It's official. And M. Robinson asks, what's the best eraser to use? Ooh, that's a big question.
Yeah, because that depends really on the medium that you're working with.
I think I have my favorite eraser to use. I don't know if it's necessarily the best. I think we all kind of find our favorite, though. Matt, do you have a favorite?
My favorite is the kneaded eraser.
Okay.
I use this more than anything else.
Yeah.
It's not the most fun eraser to use. We all know what eraser that is.
Oh, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Electric eraser.
The one with a battery.
Yeah. But
it might be the second most fun eraser to use because you can make little sculptures out of it when you're, waiting. When you're waiting in line at the grocery store or wherever you wait, you can pull your little eraser out and make a rubber ducky out of it.
Are you carrying a kneaded eraser around with you?
Okay. As a teacher, I give standardized tests.
Right.
And I'm not allowed to read a magazine or my phone while I'm giving standardized tests. My job is to watch the students.
So you play with erasers?
But I've taken a kneaded eraser with me every time. And for 4 hours, I make different little objects out of the kneaded eraser. I usually just start with a cube. Just make it into a nice, sharp-edged cube. That takes a while. And then go from there.
All right, I'm going to grab a white charcoal pencil now. What are the things when you're mixing white charcoal and graphite or this carbon graphite mix? The white charcoal will not really cover over the top of this pencil, but this pencil will kind of go over the top of some white charcoal applications to a certain degree. So you kind of have to plan out where your light values and dark values are. And in this particular case, our light source is coming from the upper left-hand corner here, and that is producing some shadow on the side of the bridge of the nose and some highlight right down the middle. Also some shadow on the underside of the nose, and obviously those dark values inside of the nostrils, which we'll get into in just a minute. We're going to get into those nostrils. We're going to get up there
I can't wait to get up into those nostrils.
Into these nostrils and make it nice and dark. Who knows what we'll run into in those nostrils?
Probably an infection.
Let's hope not. But I'm going to go ahead and start planning out where the lighter values are. So I'm going to do this with the white charcoal pencil. And I'm going to kind of make some looser, sketchier marks as I do this to kind of replicate some skin texture. So you can kind of see that highlight right there on the tip of the nose. It kind of actually comes down maybe a little bit further. And it's the relationship between the highlights and shadows that ultimately creates the illusion of the form of the nose. It really doesn't have anything to do with lines at all.
Especially from this, from this point of view, with the nose coming straight out at us, it's really kind of foreshortened. The tip of the nose is closer to us than the nose flaps, as Matt likes to put it. So it's a little foreshortened, and that makes the shading extra important. Now, incidentally, my favorite eraser is the black pearl. It's like the pink pearl. It's a rubber eraser, but it's shaped like an oval, and it's kind of got a sharp edge all the way around. So it's kind of, it's like a flat egg. Think about it like a flattish egg. Feels really good in my hand. And then, of course, the name is Black Pearl.
That's why
I like it. Yeah. The name is so cool. So it's all marketing. I'm completely.
Because you like to think of it as a pirate ship.
Right. That's what it feels very piratey to me. It's like a big black pearl treasure.
Which you know what's a pirate's favorite subject in School is, right?
I think you told me this just a few weeks ago.
Oh, really? Art.
That's right.
You could go on forever with stupid pirate jokes. Isn't there a pirate day? Talk like a pirate day or something?
There is a Talk Like a Pirate Day. I mean, for whoever makes up these crazy days, like, Ice Cream Day or whatever else. But every day is something, and there is a Talk Like a Pirate Day. It's not a official holiday, I don't believe. All right, let's see. We got a couple comments.
It ought to be.
It art to be. Cynthia asks or says, can you use these pencils alongside of standard graphite pencils? Do they mix well?
To be honest with you, I have not tried it. This is the second drawing that I've done using these pencils. And I think you probably could, but I will tell you that the pencils feel different when you're making marks. Graphite kind of has, I don't want to say a chalky feel, but it's definitely more of a powdery feel. And these pencils feel a little bit more like colored pencils. So they have a little bit more of a waxy feel when you make contact with the surface. So since graphite pencils and colored pencils really don't jive too well together, I would imagine that you might run into some similar issues with these pencils, but I don't know. Like I said, this is the second drawing I've done with these pencils. But since there's graphite in them, maybe so. There's two ways to look at it.
Yeah, give it a shot.
Yeah, you never know until you try. Yeah.
All right, Sketch Jennifer says, Matt, please do not include any boogers. Yuck. He's not going to do that.
I don't see any boogers in there.
No, that's not what we're going to find in there, I'm sure.
No.
And Veek asks, sorry, just arrived. What paper are you using?
This is Strathmore 400 series tone gray paper.
Okay, Strathmore 400. And let's see. Iwan, I may be pronouncing your name wrong. I apologize if I am. He's got another answer for a pirate's favorite subject in school. It's archaeology.
Oh,
good one.
That is a good one. Although they didn't have archaeology at my school.
No.
They have archaeology at your school?
Not in high school. I did take anthropology, but in college. But as close as I got to anything archaeological.
They could bring in what's his name, Indiana Jones. It's a guest.
Harrison Ford, or is that what you're talking about?
No,
bringing the
Jones.
actor.
The character, Indiana Jones was an archaeologist.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. Today,
that's right.
We have Indiana Jones.
Let's see.
Okay, so this
Robinson?
is a 2B graphite pencil, and now I'm going to start adding some of the darker tones, but I'm going to do so pretty lightly here. Not quite ready to commit to some of the darker values.
Matt, have you ever noticed a kneaded eraser getting hard over time?
Mm-hmm. I have noticed that, yep.
Do you do anything specific to keep yours from turning hard? Like, do you store it in a container or anything like that?
Usually, if they're really hard, I just kind of mess with it for a little while and they soften up.
Just warm them up again and soften them. Okay, so maybe...
I've had some kneaded erasers that have gotten really old, and they get really hard, maybe to beyond the point of usability, but for the most part, just if you kind of play around with it.
I guess I lose mine too soon because I've never noticed a kneaded eraser
I don't know how you
hard.
use it because you're carrying it to the store and playing with it.
The truth is, my kneaded erasers get covered or filled with lint before they turn hard because I carry them around in my pocket to grocery stores and standardized tests. So I have to get rid of them when they start to get dirty from foreign materials. God forbid they fall onto the floor. So.
Oh. Okay, so this first application here of the graphite is going to seem pretty textury. You can kind of see all the texture in there. And I'm using a 2B pencil. I probably could have gone to a HB initially, but anyway, I'm going to focus most of my efforts down to the actual nose part instead of what's happening up here. So if I have time remaining, I'll fill up the rest of the picture plane, but for right now, I'm going to kind of take my time down here. So if you'll remember, just like I said, the initial part is just finding those 4 lines, and then the rest is developing the value. And this process of developing the value can take a little bit of time. So it's important to be patient. And I am using a very light touch to apply this pencil. You can't see it, but I'm holding the pencil really low down on the shaft. If I was holding it up here, I'd make more deliberate marks. But since I'm holding it down, I'm kind of just using the side of the pencil and just touching the surface. Now, if you were using a pencil that was a little bit lighter than this pencil, like the HB, then you wouldn't necessarily have to do that. But I just want a really light touch here for right now. Now, when I blend this with the blending stump in just a minute, a lot of these values are going to be muted a little bit. So the whites are going to get softer, and the whites are going to get darker, and the darks are going to get lighter. That's what I mean by being muted. So I'm kind of keeping that in mind. But I know that this little centerpiece that comes down, the centerpiece of the nose here, that is anatomically correct to call that centerpiece. Do you know what that piece is called?
I know what the dent under your nose is called.
That's the philtrum.
Right, I got the philtrum down, but I'm not sure about the, the cartilage between the nostrils. I'm sure it has its own name.
Well, whatever it is, it recedes, so it's darker. In fact, I forgot to mention that. A good way to think about what needs to be dark and what needs to be light on the face is just kind of generally remembering that anything that recedes is typically going to be darker in value, and anything that protrudes is going to be lighter in value. And that is with the assumption that the light source is coming from above. The nostrils recede, obviously, so the values are darker. This area underneath the nose recedes.
We got an answer. It's septum.
Okay, the septum. Oh, that's so easy.
I remember that now because of septum piercings.
That's right. Anyway, so the bridge of the nose sticks out and protrudes, so typically it's lighter in value. And the area underneath the nose recedes, so it's typically darker in value.
Now, we did have a question from Carol Ann a few minutes ago. I want to get to that before we get too far away from it in time. And Carol Ann asks, had asked, are there any dry media that layer well over graphite? And I've been thinking about that. You know, graphite is such a unique medium. It's kind of slick and shiny a little bit. So a question that I ask myself is, are there any media that actually look good with graphite? And I don't think there's a whole lot. You know, I think graphite is a very good standalone medium. For me, I don't use it well in a mixed media fashion. However, typically softer media go over, generally speaking, softer media usually go over harder media. And so you could probably, if the paper has enough tooth, so that the graphite hasn't completely filled it up, or you haven't worked and shaded with your graphite so vigorously that it has already filled the tooth of the page, I would imagine that you can go over greasy graphite pencils with soft pastel and probably oil pastel also, as long as the paper had enough tooth remaining.
Yeah, and that designation of the tooth is very important, because if there's not enough tooth to capture the material that you're putting over the top, then it won't stick. You'll still see the graphite lines through the application. But, this white charcoal is powdery, and it does not cover over the top of the graphite.
And it's soft.
And, yeah. So I would...
oil pastels are sticky, which why
oil pastels definitely will go over graphite.
Yeah, they'll stick to just about anything. But I don't know how oil pastel, would look with graphite, unless you just have a real, there may be a subject matter, an effect that would be appropriate for.
Well, I think if you're using oil pastels with graphite, then I guess the resulting image would be mostly soft pastel, and you would cover up the graphite.
Cover a lot of it up, yeah.
Now, as I'm adding this darker value here with the graphite, you can see how contrasty it is right now. But I am still trying to leave some spaces open to kind of create that skin texture look. So I'm trying to find a good term for it. I'm making a splotchy application. So I'm doing some hatching and cross hatching, but also kind of making some circular strokes there. I'm trying to mimic the texture of the skin with my pencil applications.
Trying to get that little bit of variability in there. It's like smooth, but not perfectly smooth.
Right. It's got some... There's little freckles and things that are
Yeah.
happening there. Those little imperfections are important to capture. So we're going to gradually get darker as we go. So I'm going to try not to get too dark too quickly, which is a mistake that frequently happens. You get all excited and you get your values too dark a little bit too quickly. Now, because the nose sticks out, it also creates a little bit of shadow underneath. So
Laurie G has an interesting comment. You can carefully use varnish over graphite, then try another piggybacking on top of what you say, I use, and I didn't even think about it before, but I do use acrylic medium over graphite sometime just to seal it up and then work over top of. Of course, I usually cover up the graphite drawing completely that's underneath, but you don't have to. That's a great way to keep the graphite in place while you work with another media over it, varnish or acrylic medium. So great comment.
That's a good point. But when you're sealing something, either in the method that you described or what that user just commented on,
yeah,
you're really not mixing the mediums at that point.
No,
You're
they're
actually
not
separating
mixed.
them.
You may see one in like in terms of broken color, like leaving patches, but it wouldn't be mixing. That's true. Good point, Matt.
Well, I'm just saying that because.
But you could layer.
You could definitely layer, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
But then, why would you want to? Why not just use another medium?
Yeah.
Why must you combine graphite? Yeah, I think the reason why I'm answering the question myself, I think people are comfortable with graphite because they know it so well, you know. And because they know it so well and they feel comfortable with it, they have a higher level of confidence. And people are more apt to do things when they have a higher level of confidence. So
it's like you go with what you know, so to speak. And so we want to choose graphite. I like to choose graphite because I feel like I'm pretty good at using it compared to media that I'm newer to.
All right, I almost got this first application down. Let's see how we're doing.
Edie asks, what's the difference, please, between white charcoal, which you're using in this artwork some, and chalk?
Well, white charcoal...
Here we go. Down the rabbit hole of white charcoal.
Not really white charcoal.
Right.
White charcoal is what? Calcium carbonate?
Calcium carbonate,
that's what
we
we think
believe
it
is
is.
pretty much what white charcoal is. But, the different pencil brands don't really... they don't really share all that information, so there could be some other materials in the white charcoal. What about chalk? Chalk is just heavily compressed, some sort of heavily compressed pigment.
Well, are you talking about chalk, or are you talking about chalk pastels?
Right. I guess we need
pastels?
clarification there, because chalk pastels have a binder in them, a glue, gum arabic, that holds them together, and they're a little bit more airy and porous than like blackboard chalk, which is very dense.
And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of binder in this white charcoal either.
I'll bet there is. Yeah, I bet there is. Part of the secret recipe.
Maybe it's clay or something. I don't know. But I can tell you that they behave slightly different. They're similar, but they definitely behave differently on the surface. If I pulled out a white charcoal pencil, it'd definitely be more powdery, and I think it would be even worse working with this combination. It would be even harder to combine these two mediums. All right, let's start with some of the darker areas here with the blending stump, and I'm just going to go ahead and start.
There are lots of questions on the screen, and I'm going to try to answer them, but also, sometimes Matt needs to break in and tell us what he's doing. So some of the comments have already rolled off the screen, but one question to me, I think, was, I believe from Christine, why would you cover your graphite drawing with acrylic medium? We had just mentioned that to layer. The reason I do that is not to use the graphite and acrylic in any sort of mixed media fashion. I might, and I do sometimes, make a drawing on a canvas panel, like a piece of masonite, a masonite panel with graphite. And then I want to start a painting with oil paint, and the graphite will sometimes mix into your lighter values when you're working along an edge right up against the line, and actually darken that value. So I paint over my graphite drawings sometimes with acrylic medium. It's kind of like gesso, right? Gesso is acrylic with white in it, and acrylic medium is acrylic with no color in it at all. And so it kind of goes over and just makes a clear layer that seals the graphite. That way it's not loose and it's not going to mix into my paint while I start to scrub my initial values in. So I'm trying to lock that drawing into place so that it doesn't, doesn't change the values of my paint mixtures. So a totally different reason than for what the original question was asking.
Okay, I'm using the blending stump obviously here to work some of the material out, and I like to use a blending stump that has mostly light material on it for my lighter areas, and one that already has some darker material on it for the darker areas. And I've obviously started with the darker areas, but this is where we're going to have some mixing occur and some softening of the values, as I mentioned before. And this is where it's going to start to take on an appearance of being skin instead of being pencil marks, hopefully. And hopefully we haven't gotten too dark too quickly in some of these areas. But if we have, we can erase a little bit and back off on things. But when I'm using a blending stump or a blending tool, I'm thinking of it almost like I'm using a brush and I'm painting with the blending stump. So I'm not just haphazardly going to town here with the stump. I'm thinking about the form of the subject and how I'm going to create these textures and so on. You can still see that the skin texture is a little pronounced on the side of the nose, but I kind of like that. I think it adds a little bit of character.
Yeah, I do too.
So this might be something that I exaggerate a little bit in this drawing, just to kind of make it look a little bit more like skin. But I'm working mainly on the right side at this point because that's mainly where we see these darker values. And I'm trying to model the nose in the process. So this little white area I've got down here, it needs to be lighter in value, but it's a little strong. So I'm allowing some of the dark material on the blending stump to kind of knock it back a little bit.
You know, what makes a drawing like this so challenging is the subtlety between the values. You know, I can definitely see the shapes of values in the nose, but they're not that far apart from one another.
Yeah, there's just very subtle shifts. And one thing that you can do if you're having trouble seeing values or working with values, it looks like most of my nose is a little too dark, so we're going to have to lighten things up a little bit, maybe with some white charcoal. But you can always use a program that has a color dropper in it or an eyedropper where you can practice moving around the image and try to match the value yourself initially, and then use the eyedropper tool to pull out the actual value that you're trying to match, and then compare that to the value that you've drawn on your paper. It doesn't have to be a shape or anything. You just have to try to match the value. So you find a particular area and you try to draw a little square of that value on your paper, and then you can check your work by using the eyedropper tool, and that will make your perceptions of value a little bit better over time.
That's a great idea. Another way to use digital art technology to support our traditional art.
Absolutely. All right, so let's bring.
All right, I'm starting to really feel the value, or have been for some time, of that nose, but I can, with the subtle highlights just over the nostrils, that they feel nice and thin. I feel like I could. I know it sounds horrible. I feel like I could just reach right in there.
Go right up there.
Yep, it's very hollow.
See what you find, right? Especially in this one, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, look at that. That's the perfect size. That is.
Did you trace your fingertip? Is that how you got that contour?
That's the perfect nostril side. All right, so let's keep going here. Again, I feel like the values on the nose are a little dark. It still looks a little splotchy, so we'll try to clean that up here in just a minute by making the nostril actually a little bit darker. That might seem strange, but we're going to actually make some things darker to make some of the areas look a little bit lighter. And then we will actually physically make some of these areas a little bit lighter here, if we can. So in retrospect, I feel like I really should have stuck with the HB pencil a little bit longer.
Now, there were more questions about pastel chalk and blackboard chalk, and I didn't necessarily read them. I've just been waiting and watching and reading all of the comments that you guys have been putting in the chat. So I'm learning a lot about blackboard chalk here. I don't draw with blackboard chalk except on blackboards, and we don't even have blackboards anymore. So I haven't done that in probably a decade or so. So the chat is full of great information on blackboard chalk if you're interested in that. And so thank you guys for all of your knowledge and research.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is, like I mentioned, is we're going to make some values darker to make other areas appear a little bit lighter. And that's because value is relative. So we understand value based on the values that are around it. So we can make some of these areas on the nose actually feel a little bit lighter by making some of the areas around it a little bit darker. So we're going to switch over to the 8B pencil. I got 14 minutes. Holy cow.
Does that seem like a lot to you?
It seems like a lot to me. I feel like that's a lot of time. So
yeah, you've really developed this one.
It's still got a ways to go. I mean, we work on a nose or an eye or whatever forever. The good news is the thing's gone. The
Yeah,
oil
you're right.
pastel mark.
I see.
Yeah.
That's why you added a little bit of extra
That's why there's
variety
so many
to the
freckles
skin.
here.
Can't even tell you which mark it would have been.
All right, so we're going to go in here, and the nostril's the darkest area, so we're going to go ahead and make this pretty darn dark in here. And what will happen, maybe you're already noticing it, is by making this area darker, it makes the other areas appear lighter. And they're not getting lighter, they just look lighter because value is relative. And we'll use this little transition here.
Now we're getting the range over there.
And the 8B is pretty strong.
Christine asks, how do you know when to switch pencils?
Well, I have this little voice in my head. And it says, Matt, it's now time to switch to the 8B.
No.
No, not at all. But it is kind of a little bit of a voice in your head, and without sounding crazy.
Yeah.
I know I need to make values darker, so I know I need to switch to a darker pencil. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't go back to the lighter pencil. In fact, I often do that, especially in a graphite drawing, because there's a little trick with graphite that you can do. You can make an area dark with a softer pencil, like a 4B or 6B or something like that. But what happens is a lot of times the paper gets the texture of the paper is real evident when you do that. And instead of using a dark pencil to smooth it out, you can go back to like a 2H or an HB pencil and go back over the top of those applications. And what happens is the harder pencil actually fills in the tooth and creates some grays in the tooth of the paper, so
it lessens the contrast of the tooth.
The texture appears to not be so evident.
I see.
And that's a trick I've used for a long time. Yeah, so even though you switch to a darker pencil, you can always go back to a lighter pencil and continue to make adjustments. And a lot of times you can make those subtle adjustments with the H pencil or the HB pencil.
I've never done that because I pretty much the lightest pencil I usually use is an HB, and then I just usually get darker from there. Now I did have a 5H pencil in my hand today that looked brand new. Came out of a bag of donated art supplies.
They all look brand new.
Well, this one, they all. You're right.
I've never
these
seen
all
a
look
5H
brand new.
pencil that didn't look brand new.
Because nobody uses them. That's right. But this 5H actually had, the font looked a little different on it. So I looked a little closer at it and rolled it over my hand, and it was stamped W. Germany. So it was a pencil that had been made in West Germany. That's how old it is.
Whoa.
And it looked brand new. I don't think it had ever been used before.
I didn't even think about
and
that.
it was from like 1989 or before.
Wow. West
Crazy.
Germany.
So I saved it. It's my special pencil from West Germany.
No kidding. Well, at least it's lived its entire life in freedom.
Yeah.
I was explaining to one of my daughters, my 13-year-old, about, all the stuff that's going on in Russia and Ukraine and all that.
Oh, yeah.
And
right.
we watched a video that showed the map of Europe change.
Over the last 100 years.
It's like every 2 years the map's different, And I was explaining that this is part of history, and Europe changes frequently.
Mm-hmm.
Because those things can be kind of scary. They are scary, but anyway.
Our map changes. We just keep adding territories, so it kind of changes. I guess they're all changing.
All right, you can see I added a few spots down here. There's some little darker sections down there, little dark pores. Maybe there's some skin treatments that need to be applied. I don't know.
You've got 9 minutes. You could give this a mustache.
Oh, I'm not giving it a mustache.
A pencil-thin mustache. No.
I don't think I'd have enough room for that.
I don't think so.
The pencil. I did give it a mustache. You just can't see it.
It's down there.
It's down there off the bottom of the screen there. So I'm using the blending stump here to bring a little bit of darker value down here, because with the philtrum since it recedes, it's got a little bit of darker value.
It's
there.
barely, just the top of it's in there. I can tell.
And we'll go ahead and add a little bit of lighter value on the opposite side there. So it kind of feels a little bit like we've got that out. I really would like to have a blending stump that has a little less junk on it, but I don't have one. Well, I do. I just don't want to go look for it. All right, let's start making some of these values on the nose a little bit lighter. I'm going to go back to the area that was originally the lightest part and make that a little bit stronger. Now, just like we can make the values appear a little bit lighter by making an area darker, we can make areas feel a little bit darker by making areas a little bit lighter. So you can see I'm making this highlight a little bit stronger, and it's making that side of the nose feel a little bit darker. It's increasing the contrast. And we can exaggerate this if we want, which I might kind of exaggerate it a little bit, because it does make the nose feel like it sticks out a little bit further.
Yeah, I like that.
I'm still going to soften it, maybe. But we can go back over the top with another application. And, skin kind of has that layered, it almost looks like layers of transparency.
It is.
Yeah. So if you kind of put down a little bit of the material and then blend it and then put another layer and then blend it, you're kind of creating that transparency.
That subtle type of depth that you get in skin. Mm-hmm.
So that's one little trick. And I mentioned this the first week. We do have a course called Portrait Drawing the Smart Way, and we actually go through every facial feature in depth with very similar combination of media. We use graphite and white charcoal for every one of the facial features, and then we draw several faces using a variety of different techniques to ensure accuracy in a portrait drawing. Because there are secrets that artists use to ensure that their portrait drawings are accurate. And we cover that in this course. But I'm thinking of that because these drawings are turning out in a similar way to the drawings in the course, because I'm using a similar combination of media here.
Well, M. Robinson says that nose looks like a negative COVID-19 nose. So it's very healthy.
Well, thank goodness.
Very healthy.
Yeah, but if it wasn't, we'd have plenty of room to stick that applicator up there. I know I am an expert COVID test giver.
You could use an extra large swab for that nostril.
Now I'm allowing these lighter values to be predominantly on the left side of the nose, but this person has a little bit of a little bit that comes out a little bit here, a little higher up. Now, just to remind you, I've kind of made things a little bit closer up than what they are in the reference, and maybe just slightly a little bit higher up on the paper. So that's why some of this information up here on the top is pushed up a little bit higher. Now you can see that some of the strokes need to go vertically down the bridge of the nose, and some need to go horizontally. You really see that pronounced up at the top of the nose where we're getting close to the brow. So I'm just kind of following what the reference tells me to do.
Mm-hmm. Margaret says that she started the portrait drawing course today and that her skull is pretty scary.
Yeah. Well, we start by drawing skulls. So the skull is what is underneath the skin.
Yeah, that's good. Makes sense. Good place to start.
Good place to start
Structure.
to kind of just understand the underlying structure of the skull. And also it kind of gets your feet wet with observation, because, drawing a portrait, just like anything else, is very heavily dependent on observation. Even though there are some things we can do to help ensure accuracy and all that stuff, it still need to draw with some observation. Lots of observation. So you can see here with these very subtle applications with the white charcoal that you can just go back and forth forever if you want with any facial feature, really, not just the nose, really with anything you draw, you can keep working it forever.
It's true. You can always get a little closer.
What'd you say? Get a little closer?
Always get a little closer to your reference. You can always work it a little longer.
Well, you find things.
Mm-hmm.
The more you work, the more you find things. There's a little bit of light right here, capturing or hitting on the side of part that sticks out. I think we're starting to get an understanding of the recess in there. Let's do a little bit more blend here. Just to see if we can eradicate a little bit more of that texture of the paper and smooth this transition a little bit.
Now, I'll be interested to see your 5th drawing of the season, because these are 45-minute sketches. And,
portrait, the final portrait will not be like this at all.
Yeah, right.
It is going to be a small head.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the locations of the facial features. Okay. And we're not going to draw a face like this. I was thinking
this is going to be a long episode.
Next week's episode of Getting Sketchy will last all week.
Right.
No, I was thinking with the eye drawing that I did that it would be cool to do a really large portrait, because that eye was about the same size as this. So if you think about a drawing piece of paper, and the eye would be about this big, what a large portrait that would be, and actually how realistic and representational it would look, because you're zoomed in so close to the facial features. And there are artists that do that. A lot of the hyper realist work on huge sheets of paper, which allows them to zoom in really close. And then when you back up from it, it looks hyper realistic. But I thought about doing that, and maybe doing that as a course. Maybe one day. But I also thought about how long that would take.
Yeah.
But no, for Getting Sketchy, we will be drawing a face and just talking about facial features, or talking about the positioning of the facial features.
Now, Jorge Martins asks, and I believe this is in reference to you working on gray paper, what if the paper is white? Well, the values are still all the same. So if the paper were white, the place, in Matt's drawing that he would have worked the least is actually that highlight. And instead he had to use a lot of material to make the highlight stand out, and he would have kind of avoided that area, but he would have still looked for the same shapes of value and the same relationship between those values, how light one is next to another or dark one is next to another, just working only in one direction.
Well, it's an advantage to work on gray paper, and I have a video about the advantages to working on gray paper because it really is a major advantage. And The main advantage is that you start with a medium value. So value is the darkness or lightness of a color, but when we start on a gray sheet of paper, we're starting in the middle of the value scale, and that allows us to use light and dark media, like we're using here, to push the range of value outward. So let's say we have a value scale right here, and I got Tom because this drawing's pretty much finished. Let's say we have a value scale here, and we've got our range of values. So we've got the darkest darks. I'll try to do this as quickly as possible. And then somewhere in here, we're starting to get lighter, and then lighter, and then lighter still. So we have a value scale, and we want to create a full range of value in an image. So we want to have all of these values included. And for the most part, you can see that I have included all the values in here. When we start on a white sheet of paper, we're starting at this end of the value scale, starting up here at the top. And then we add media, or add darker mediums to the surface to create a full range. So we start at one end. We got to go the whole way to get a full range. If we start on black paper, which is pretty cool, we start at the other end of the value scale, and then we add light media to the surface, and we have to create a lot of that light value in order to create a full range. When we start with a gray paper, we're starting somewhere in the middle. So we're pushing the values outward in both directions, which makes it easier to create a full range of value.
You don't have to go as far away from where you start.
Right. Now, the caveat to all that, caveat?
That's right, caveat, I think.
Caveat, not the cavi ship. The caveat.
The caviar.
Well, excuse me, sir. Have you seen my caveat? I parked it here yesterday. Anyway, the caveat to that is, I don't even forgot what I was talking about. Oh, when you're working on gray paper,
pushing the values out.
You have to use a light medium and a dark medium together, or you have to use a medium that's capable of producing light values and dark values. Like with a regular graphite pencil, this can only produce values that are darker. And so you have to rely on the white of the paper, you have to rely on a white medium. Where you're working with gray paper, you have to use a medium that gets lighter, because if not, then your lightest value is the gray of the paper. And that means that your value ranges from here to here. And that is not enough of a range of value to create anything significant. So,
all right, we've got a question from Lisa, and she's typed it twice, once in lowercase and once in capital letters. Thanks for the tip, buddy, by the way. All caps helps. Lisa asks, why do you want to eliminate the grain or the texture of the paper? That it seems pretty good for skin.
Yeah, I don't think you have to eliminate it.
Yeah.
I think
maybe it's because you were using the stump some, you know?
Yeah, but in the drawing here, you can see that I have some applications that aren't blended too. So if you just didn't blend, your drawing would have a certain look, and that's fine. It would just show some of the tooth of the paper, and that's not a bad thing. That's just a different thing.
Yeah.
I could blend this more if I wanted to create more of a refined drawing. In fact, if I was doing this as a finished drawing, I'd probably go back over the top with another blended application. Then I would apply more of the dark material and the light material, and maybe even blend that some more. So I would continue to work the surface so that I created an accurate replication, or a more accurate replication. Or you can be looser and sketchier and allow the texture of the paper to play a role in the aesthetic qualities of the artwork. There's nothing wrong with that.
It's just personal preference, I think.
Yeah, and it's different for every subject matter. I mean, we're drawing a nose here, and skin texture is generally pretty smooth. So you kind of want to have a smoother look to the drawing. And this surface, the texture of the paper is relatively smooth compared to other surfaces as well. But you know, you don't have to do it one way or the other. I can't tell you guys how many people want to know the right way to do something. And I get it. I understand why people want to know the right way. And
you want to know where you stand.
In all the school, in all of the disciplines that we study, there's usually the right way.
There's usually the right answers.
The right way in science. There's the right way in math. There's the answer, and it's in the back of the book.
There's the right way to cite your sources.
Right.
Or a few right ways, depending on what university you go to, I guess. But there's a specific way. And in art, there's a lot of ways to get, to point B. A lot of ways to get there.
There are a lot of rights. So Don't feel like because one person does one thing a certain way that is the way that you should do it all the time, or it's, so hopefully that answers your question a little bit. All right. Anything else there?
I feel like I probably missed some questions tonight because the chat text is a little larger than usual due to me not having a new pair of glasses yet. So again, I'm sorry if I missed any questions. Here's one from the bicycle lady. Let's see. Regarding Faber-Castell Pitt Graphite matte pencils like Mars Lumographic black pencils. That's a question. Is that a question? But I feel like it's part of another comment, and without the first part, maybe I'm not going to figure it out
here. Are Faber-Castell Pitt Graphite matte like Mars Lumograph black pencils? I don't know. I don't know if they are or not, but I know a lot of people want us to try the Faber-Castell Graphite matte pencils.
Yeah.
But since they have graphite in the name, I'm not sure if they're going to be the same or not. They might be different.
Yeah, we can't answer that one. And I was talking with another art teacher today about those pencils and actually kind of complaining to her that I haven't yet ordered any to try so that we can talk about them here on Getting Sketchy. And we talk about them every week and still haven't used them.
All right. I think that was the end, and we need to get ready.
Yeah, it's time to get ready for the next show.
So if you got a last question, you probably ease it in there. But if not, we're going to go ahead and switch out over here. Alrighty, you guys. Thanks for sticking around for the last hour. I hope you know some more about drawing than you did before we started. No, nothing. Next week, Ashley will be continuing his Down on the Farm theme?
Down on the Farm theme, yeah. That's right. We drew a rooster last week, an animal, so we might draw maybe some farm equipment. We'll see.
All right, and that will definitely fall in line with the motif. And in 2 weeks from now, I'll be drawing motif. I just don't know my motif, which will be teeth. I just don't know if I'm going to draw an open mouth or a closed mouth.
I was thinking about that for you today.
Yeah.
I would draw an open mouth because
it's more difficult.
It is more difficult, but people struggle with teeth.
Yeah, that's true.
And seeing sometimes that each tooth is its own form and there's shading. There's not like always dark lines between them. Sometimes it's just shading. So I think that would be valuable for people to see and see how the teeth are sort of in the round and on the round. Almost like a unit. I don't know. I almost want to do the mouth drawing next week. I love drawing teeth. I'm a little jealous, actually. So.
Well, what animals have teeth?
Have you seen the
There's
fish?
Lots of animals
have you
teeth.
seen the fish that looks like it has human teeth?
Oh yeah, I have. It's a parrotfish.
Okay. That's what
I think it's a parrotfish.
They don't have those on farms, so I won't be drawing that next week.
But they have them on parrotfish farms.
All right.
Got to be parrotfish.
I'm not doing a
farms,
fish farm.
Do they eat parrotfish?
I have no idea. I just look them up on the internet every once in a while just to show people that they have human teeth. Hey, do you want to see something
believe that fish?
Really creepy?
This fish
Look at this. Look and let's see the goblin shark. Is that it? That's the other really creepy.
No. But I know what you're talking about. The goblin shark looks like it has a nose.
Well, it's a shark that has a mouth, but another mouth comes out of it.
Oh,
it's really creepy.
Yeah. That's one of the deep.
Yeah,
fishes,
super deep sea fish. So I don't know why we're talking about this.
Yeah, talking about motifs.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, anyway, we'll continue next week. And for those of you who are going to join us over at Virtual Instructor, we'll see you in just a minute as Ashley's going to wrap up his painting with Photoshop series. And I saw the painting already, and it's pretty cool, and it looks awesome. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But for the rest of you folks out there, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. And remember, we'll be here right here next week at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we hope to see you then. Good night, everybody.